Today we are going to take a look at the Holley 5-inch display, and this is my first time opening this, so you will kind of be watching me learn and figure this thing out kind of as we go. So in the box so far we have obviously the cables that we need and some adapters and stuff. I think this is a pretty neat touch where we have an actual windshield mount. So this is awesome. So I can't tell you how many cars I have come in with a 3.5-inch display where they just have nowhere to mount it, so they literally throw it on the floor, and Lord only knows how long it actually stays there. So even if this is just like a temporary solution to give you somewhere to mount it so it's not laying on the ground, is nice. And then some cars just don't have a good spot to mount a display like this, so that'll give you the option there. So I think that's a nice touch. The unit uses a micro SD card, so it gives you like a standard size SD card adapter. And this is one of the nicest parts about this display without question. This is a huge pain in the butt for a lot of people with their cars, but this actually has a GPS speedometer. So this is going to simplify a lot of people's lives, just being able to, you plug this cable into your Holley, into the display, you plug the GPS in, and now you have a working speedometer without having to deal with any wheel speed sensors or transmission sensors or anything like that. Here's the display itself. Weighs next to nothing, so that's nice. So it's actually a rectangle shape rather than a square, which I feel like makes mounting in most cars easier. It's nice and thin, it's not real thick. So here is the little micro SD card. Here's the GPS. You can see the harnesses. Decent length. And it's kind of a connector I don't think I've ever really seen before, and it doesn't screw in like you would assume it does. It just, you just push it in and it locks into place and pull it out. You can even kind of hear how solid of a connection that is, so don't think that's going anywhere. And on our actual communication cable here, we have the standard CAN connector that you've seen for such a long time, and this new style connector on this end. It actually just kind of feels like something you'd see on a TV back in the day. So that one just screws in nice and easy. I like that this is a 90-degree connector and it's not rocket shipping out 300 feet. So from a depth perspective, for your mounting options, that's not so bad. Oh, let's actually measure this thing. They call it a 5-inch dash, but let's see what the rectangular dimensions are. All right, so we're gonna call that 5 1/8. And then this way, about 2 3/4. And let's grab a 3.5-inch screen and see how they compare. Here's what they look like side by side. Height-wise, very similar. About 1 3/4 or so difference. And the bezel around the side is much smaller, and it just looks way more modern. This feels more like an iPhone, as to where these things have been around forever, so this feels more like a Game Boy. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that the actual touchscreen aspect of the screen is going to be significantly more responsive, as that's where you could kind of tell the age of these things when you want to push a button and you got to hit it 12 times for it to kind of recognize what you're trying to do. But when it comes to the adapters here for the suction cup mount, they give you a couple of different ones for different thicknesses, and they just slide on here nice and easy. And the best part is you get the super satisfying click when it's in place, and then pops out nice and easy. And then this one works the same way, just spaces it out a little bit further. And then traditional suction cup mount feels kind of like a GoPro suction cup mount, and it just kind of pops here, push on it, now you're ready to go. All right, now let's take a look at this next to a 686 Pro Dash and a 12.3 Pro Dash. This poor neglected car has been ready to get tuned for months now, and I just can't find time to use my own dyno. All right, so here is the 5-inch versus the 686 dash, and it's, I guess, pretty much in line with about what you would expect. I actually do like that the 5-inch dash doesn't have this like big bezel all the way around it. The Pro Dash feels like you got so much of the screen is just kind of not being used as a result of that. If we actually turn this around this way, you can probably get a better idea. So if we line this up with the actual bezel, there's about that much of a difference in screen size, which is probably maybe a little bit bigger than the difference between the 3.5-inch screen and the 5-inch screen. So if you did want to mount it kind of in your cluster there, definitely doable. It looks a lot more, let's call that presentable, than the 3.5-inch screen mounted there. Still kind of shocked at how light it is. Now, if you did want to use the suction cup mount, you might want to, usually I'll try and get these things just a little bit wet. Again, it's just kind of like any other suction cup mount. You push it on there, and then you flip the little flappy. And I'm not sure if I can do this with one hand or not. Oh, apparently it's very easy to do with one hand. And there is a locking nut on the back so that it will, once you position it the way that you want, you can kind of keep it there. That's a pretty cool feature. I actually use suction cups for a lot of different things, and my dyno wideband for the longest time I had a suction cup mount for. Let me see if I can find that. So before ECUs like Holley had built-in widebands that you could actually trust, these were my go-to. These were about $3,500 a piece at the time, but I would suction cup mount these to the windshield as I was tuning. So if you ever feel like your Holley ECU is too expensive, this is literally $7,000 worth of just widebands. All right, here's the 5-inch display versus the 12.3 display. And you could argue that this makes the 5-inch display look small, but the reality is I think this puts it into perspective how big the 12.3-inch dash is. It's huge. All right, my favorite part about this thing so far is you can use the suction cup mount to stick it to the table, and now it holds it perfectly. So that's gonna make just playing with it way easier than it flopping around on the table. All right, so I assumed I was gonna have to update firmware on different things and whatnot, and I think this is actually really awesome, but just simply plugging this into Terminator X that was running V6 software already, everything just immediately worked. There was no updating of anything required. So the installation process was like legitimately 3 seconds. So sometimes with electronics, when you buy new things and you have to update everything, it can be a huge pain. So I was pretty excited about that. So I have to sit here a little bit awkward for this camera to pick this up and to be able to push these buttons. So bear with me, sitting sideways over here. So I haven't really played with this too much yet, but we have 3 predefined displays here. I like this one the most by far. And even though we can't change the actual layout, we can change each one of the individual channels. So if you wanted to change a channel, you just hold down on the spot where you want to change it, and when you let go, it'll bring this up. So if you disable it, it just kind of goes away entirely. If you enable it, it brings up your channel. If you hit edit, if we go here to channel and we hit edit, we can change this to whatever channel we want. Target air fuel ratio. You can change all of your warnings and your lights and all of that stuff. And then you can also change the rate in which it updates, which is, again, nice. Some of the channels you might have noticed update really, really fast. So when you're looking at the screen, the thing's spazzing out. So this gives you the option to change that down to make it less annoying. Again, I like that a lot. And you can see we basically just have an error here for the GPS because it's not plugged in at the moment. And obviously I'm not in a car driving, so it wouldn't move anyways. And let's see, we make the TPS move here. Make the RPM move. You can see all the different colors for the different warnings. So if you wanted to change that, you would just hold, let go, and then push edit, warnings, and here's all your 6, 7, 8,000 RPM, so that's pretty cool. So I could be wrong, but I don't ever see these layouts being fully user adjustable. That's more of a Pro Dash thing, but I would be interested to see if Holley comes out with any additional layouts or ability to change background colors, or just give it a little bit more adjustability. It looks like if we just touch the screen like this, it gives you the ability to make it dimmer and brighter, whether it's nighttime or daytime out, so that's a nice touch. And if we go over here to these lines, that's where you're gonna get into the actual menu. So just like the 3.5-inch screen, we have the ability to go in and make changes to essentially all of the stuff that the 3.5-inch screen allows you to change. It does look a little bit nicer on this screen though, which is good. So it gives you the ability to make all the adjustments that you would need to make if you didn't want to use a laptop, which is nice for small changes. I always still recommend everyone tune these things using a laptop, but technically you could get by with doing everything that you need to do just here on the screen. Monitor obviously brings you up to all the displays we were already looking at. Wizards, you got your same wizard functionality that you have on the 3.5-inch screen. So if you haven't kind of realized that yet, this is a replacement for a 3.5-inch screen. So there would be no reason to have both. And logging, we can set up a start and stop here for logging. We can set up a log trigger, and so you can change the trigger for the logging. Now, considering that the Snipers and the Terminator X's do not have internal logging, this is kind of a big deal to be able to data log without actually having to have the laptop in the car. And then go to settings. So it gives you the global file. There's no trans on this ECU, so it just says air. Custom, wideband, TPS is calibrated, firmware version, etc. So that's the firmware on the unit itself. Here's where you're going to change your units. I haven't clicked on any of this stuff before, so you're watching me go through this for the first time too. Oops, I clicked on that one. Backlight settings. You can update the ECU. This is kind of invaluable for firmware updates and stuff. Even though I use the laptop for everything, I always keep at least a 3.5-inch screen around just in case we need to do a firmware update, kind of the force-fed way. Here's where you can store different global files. Nothing on the card currently. Just going to give you some information for some diagnostic stuff and help. And apparently we take a picture of that and it will take us to Holley's website. And one last comparison just so you can see what it looks like. This is, I have no idea. I just had to look it up. This is an iPhone 12 Max Pro or something. You can see it's just a little bit smaller than the phone. All right, so there's a quick look at our 5-inch Holley display. And just the simple fact that this cable unplugs and doesn't have to dangle all the time is a nice touch. I think they've made some really nice updates on this. It's probably pretty self-explanatory that this is not a Pro Dash, so you're not going to have that level of adjustability and things like that. But compared to the old kind of outdated 3.5-inch screen, I think this is going to be a nice upgrade for a lot of people. And without a doubt, the biggest thing is going to be the ability to have the GPS speedometer. So if you're in the market for a display and you're considering buying one of these, or maybe you already have one of these and you're considering upgrading, or maybe you're even considering jumping into a Pro Dash. If you're interested in hearing kind of my pros and cons on all the different options, click on the link in the description and I can send you over kind of my unbiased opinion on the pros and cons of each of the units and maybe to help you decide on which one you should jump into. As always, I appreciate you watching and I'll see you next time.